two parts. First, a discussion of immigration issues. The core of today's participants, for those of you who've been invited by others like Alexander or me to join, back in the mid-'60s, we were volunteers in Mexican villages in a cultural exchange, and we maintain contact with each other and follow immigration and border issues. And today, after some time discussing immigration, we'll shift to the broader questions of how we can push back in general and resist proposals and actions from the new administration across various policy and civic areas. Our principal resource today is Rick Swartz, an immigration attorney and organizer in Washington, D.C. Just a couple highlights from his career. He worked for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, including doing litigation for Haitian boat people and Salvadorians. He founded the National Immigration Forum to mobilize advocacy, and his law firm builds left-right coalitions on issues from immigration reform to democracy in China. To quote Rick, "My current, arguably now my legacy cause is to rid our country of the scourge of white supremacy and nativist extremism that predicated the rise of Trumpism and fuels the now, again, clear and present dangers of unbridled propaganda, tribalism, political violence, and the corruption of our democratic republic." So Rick will make some introductory remarks about immigration. We'll have that discussion. And after about 30 minutes, I'll interrupt and Rick can describe general resistance and we'll have that discussion. We're scheduled to go for an hour, but Rick has agreed to stay until the last dog is hung. So Rick, thank you for being here. It's yours.
Well, hi everybody. Thank you for inviting me. It's quite the challenge that we're facing. I appreciate everybody's engagement and interest and determination, because we're going to need a lot of that. So, apropos of Jack's introduction, I'm going to do the best I can to have this be more of a conversation than a kind of a lecture and then questions. So as I go along, Jack, if you can kind of help us out here, I'm going to try to do it in a manner so even in these kind of two segments, 2 minutes in or 8 minutes in or whatever, let's just talk about things, ask questions or comment. So it's as much conversational as it can be. Fair enough?
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's good.
Okay. So I've been doing this kind of stuff at the national level in one way or another in DC, out of DC for 50 years now. And one way I try to sum it up, whether it was a litigating lawyer, I stopped lawyering when I was 32 years old. So that was a long time ago. It's been political work since, but it's about power. And what we have now is an onslaught of power that is extremely well prepared and ruthless, having been built around the immigration issue, as well as through the immigration writ large, over 25, 30, 35 years. It's not just happening here, it's happening in Europe. As you know, it's a phenomena rooted in fear of the other. With Trump, the notion of build walls and keep people out we don't want and get rid of those who are already here we don't want, that's a big deal. It's a historical river. It's rooted in histories of the past. So just kind of big picture wise, what I hope to share with you a little bit is kind of my mindset about immigration and how immigration relates to the broader political dynamics going on, and do so in a way which is respectful of how you all came together, going back to the 68, 70, 73, Peace Corps, Mexico, etc. And at the same time, as hard-headed as I can be about, it's one thing to understand what's going on, it's another thing to do something about it. So I'd like to kind of frame this kind of introductory part of the conversation with a bit of diagnosis related to immigration, what It's on my mind what I think is risky, dangerous in the body politic. You think about it almost like a health matter in the body politic, and some thoughts about prescription, how to think about what to do about it. So let me start, and I've got a few notes to myself, kind of given as I see things right now today, without going back 50 years or 20 or as Trump arose, let me start south of the border and what's on my mind. Remittances are about to plunge, is on my mind. Think about the role that remittances, migration, migrants, this is not just true in the United States, looking not just south, but all over the world, Philippines and elsewhere. Remittances have been a huge, huge, huge dynamic over the last 25, 30, 35 years. I think they're going to plunge as conditions in the United States become more fraught, more uncertain, more defensive for the 45 million, give or take, immigrants, documented and not, who are now in the country, 15% of the population. So I hope I'm overstating the risk, but it's on my mind. So as you're thinking down the road, be thinking about immigration policy, consequences, effects on tens of millions of people here, and how that's going to affect their relationship to the families and societies from whence they have come. Because I think it's going to be significant and dramatic, and the more aggressive and consequential the Trump, Miller, Bannon, Homan regime is here, the more consequential in these unfolding ways, I think it might be south of the border. To the extent deportations, the word of the moment, continue to pick up and build, as they say, they're going after criminals. There are all sorts of handcuffs and constraints, due process, having lack of resources, at the moment, failure of the Republicans to get their act together on the budget reconciliation, where they've got $170 billion set aside for border and immigration related matters. They may not get that done. But guess who is going to be going back in greater and greater numbers to some extent? Criminals. So imagine, I don't know, pick a time frame. 6 months, 12 months, and 100,000 criminals from the United States somehow get out of prisons here and are back someplace there. That's a big deal, just in terms of the consequences potentially on those societies. Self-deportation. So I think one of the key words and understandings, try to galvanize an understanding, is that fear is the point. Creating fear through the immigration issue. It's not like this is brand new in our history or in human history. Fear of the other has always been a organizing principle for those who have or are trying to seek power. But regardless of how many get deported, how fast, to where, the whole point of all of this, in significant part, is keep building and building and building and building fear in immigrant and related communities. I think that's kind of the heart of the domestic policy mindset of the Trump administration. And accordingly, and then I'll stop, since they can't carry a lot of this out for lack of money or legal bottlenecks or not enough judges, or just takes a lot of manpower and money to round people up, literally. Self-deportation is the strategic objective. to what extent, how much fear there is, what it looks like in 6 or 12 months, I don't know. But since they can't carry it out in any immediate way for lack of resources, minimally, watch out for vigilantes. Watch out for Proud Boys. Watch out for the white supremacy movements and networks organizing, which they are doing, no doubt about it. I'm not making it up, to become part of the deportation force in all sorts of ways. So let me stop there as a kind of a pretty negative, big picture sense of dynamics. And let's talk about it.
People who'd like to speak can just unmute, and we'll just try it, jumping in if you wish. And if that gets too hectic, we'll call on people. But for now, unmute yourself and fire away.
Is that fair enough as a beginning?
Yes, to me, several things I hadn't thought about. Economic impact on Mexico and the Philippines of no longer receiving these checks in the mail from their relatives. Destabilization from deporting criminals. Karen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Karen.
Well, I was just going to say, even though they say they're deporting criminals, then they also catch themselves saying that everyone who is undocumented in the country is a criminal. And I don't think they're going to make that much of a distinction. And I was just wondering what your perspective was on that.
Exactly right. Everybody's a criminal. So everybody's fair game. So therefore, fair game for any of the 15, 10, 12, whatever, million undocumented people in the country. Everybody's fair game because everybody's a criminal. That's not per se correct legally. Presence in the country without any other criminal behavior is a civil offense. But that's not the point. So if everybody's a criminal, everybody's fair game. And that then becomes part of the propaganda of creating fear that their strategy becomes viral. And so how does fear get created under these kinds of circumstances? It's also, well, what about at the workplace?
Yeah.
Are co-workers going to start turning in co-workers? Do HR departments? I mean, I'm raising these questions in national kind of, Chamber of Commerce. I mean, all I can do is raise questions, right? And kind of think hard, folks. Think hard. Look down the road a little bit. And you already have agreements between the governors of virtually every red state in the Trump administration on invoking the National Guards. You have under Biden the history in just the last 4 years of red state governors with glee sending their National Guards to the Texas border by invitation of Governor Abbott. And now it's who we going to deputize at the local, state and local levels to help ICE carry out the Stephen Miller purge of the country of these folks. And then back to vigilantes, if I may, there's a big dispute in Long Island on the county supervisor of Nassau County, a Republican. It's Tom Suozzi's district, the Democrat, using public money to create an armed civilian militia.
Oh my God.
You have in the states of Missouri and Mississippi and a couple of others, it's in the national press already, creating bounties turn in an undocumented, it's $1,000 a head.
Wow.
Okay, so hear me. So one of the reasons I'm exaggerated, if I may, and I hope I'm exaggerating the rivers of history here, but this is going on, and it's been years in the making.
Yes.
There were Minutemen on the border of Arizona 25 years ago.
Shooting innocent people.
So, anyhow, that's a response to the query. Yes, it's very serious.
So I'd like to say something. This is Pat. I'm calling in from California here in Southern California with Military Families Speak Out. And I was wondering, has anybody thought about the fact that so many of, especially on the border near Tijuana in San Diego, so many of our veteran military families that are active duty are going to be asked to round up members of their own families, maybe. I mean, there is that connection really strong with the Marines and being heavily Latino, going in there and being asked to do that is pretty awful too.
Wow.
Exactly. And yes, there are people aware and thinking about that. How and where to do something about it? Who knows? It's also look at local police forces in many cities. They're racially and ethnically and very diverse, and that will become a real challenge. How political organizers and leaders kind of put their arms around that and work with it in a positive way, is both an opportunity and a challenge. It's not that I have a prescription for that per se, but indeed, you raise a good question. There are many police chiefs all over the country who say, we do not want to be part of the immigration enforcement Gestapo. We have a duty to our members of our community to be trusted by them. If we're rounding up their brothers and sisters and cousins, that trust disappears. Now, that's part of an argument on the merits, right? It's a political argument. It's a human psychology argument. It's a community argument. But go back to these red states. We need to be taking that argument, in my mind, to the red states and the red state governors, and make it hard for them to be in denial on the merits because they're in lockstep with this kind of Stephen Bannon driven cleansing operation.
Could I ask you to explain documented and undocumented and whether it ultimately matters in all of this?
Well, in simplest terms, documented means you have some piece of paper.
Any piece.
That enables you to establish by law you have a legal right to be in the country. If you're undocumented, you don't have documented proof that you have a legal right to be in the country. So that's kind of the simplest way to just sort of distinguish two big classes of non-citizens.
So is that I get the distinction, but is it clear? And is it easily enforced and recognized? Or is there a lot of ambiguity there about what documents mean and who has them and what people are entitled to?
Sure, that's a good question. And the language matters because the Trump administration just changed officially from Biden the use of the word undocumented or unauthorized immigrant to illegal alien. Right? Just boom, matter of policy. Now, there are all sorts of gradations. So let's just take what's happening right now by way of illustration. There are about 800,000, give or take, Haitians, Venezuelans, Cubans, and Nicaraguans who are legally admitted to the country. The number may be a little bit high under Biden, as well as about 100,000 Ukrainians and 80,000 Afghans under what's called a parole status. It's a temporary status. It's not refugees per se. We're admitted legally. They have a work permit. They're protected thus by deportation. Trump just killed all those programs, for every single one of them. When the documentation now in hand becomes invalid by a date certain, that's going to be happening over the next weeks and months for roughly 1 million people. So they are in what, by virtue of your question, an ambiguous circumstance. And their literal legal documentation is both in flux and about to end. So, something like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rick, have you seen any data on declining school attendance in areas where there's a high immigrant population?
All over the country, there are news reports accordingly. And remember, this is just the beginning. Okay. So whether it's Florida or Texas, Maryland, there's just an incident in Maryland where a teacher got busted for putting on his social media account, hey, I'm ready to turn in students and their parents who I know as a teacher who are illegal. Okay. That's in the newspapers, just up the road from me in Maryland. Times, I do the best I can to kind of survey media from all over the country. So, a couple or 2 hours, 3 hours a day, trying to get this sensibility. And all over the country, we now have growing reports, and not just anecdotal, but coming from administrators. And my gut is that as media and enforcement actions and something happens in community or city or neighborhood A, B, or C, then that kind of protect my kids by keeping them home from school, unless I feel better than I do today that it's safe for them. And the kids may be legal, remember. Kids may often be U.S. citizen born, although they're trying to end the 14th Amendment in that respect. But parents are afraid the parent may get picked up. And the kids at school, and they have or they haven't made arrangements. So again, it becomes this corrosive, invasive virus of fear, and it's purposeful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rick. Sorry, I have to go pick up some kids, but
Is that fair enough?
Pardon me?
Was that a fair enough response?
Yeah, no. That's what I expected, actually.
Rick,
is it okay if,
Oops.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Laurel, jump in.
John, please, I'm a guest here, so you go first and then I'll go.
Oh, I'm a guest here too. But I was just gonna I was gonna ask about the effect on our economy of all these people living. Who's gonna do the work? I mean, these people work.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, come on.
So there's 30, 40 years of failure of Congress, despite good intentions of some presidents, to try to do immigration reform to be more demographically, economically down the road, smart. And the last time there was a really notable legal immigration reform was 1990. Okay. I was in the middle of it. Before that, we had under Reagan, 86, amnesty for 4 million plus, et cetera, et cetera. So, um, I'm going to try to summarize the merits briefly, but here's a political challenge about the facts. Absolutely. So you can look at virtually any major industry or economic sector. They need more, not fewer workers. Healthcare, they need them at the bottom. They need janitors in hospitals and nursing homes. They need nurses. They need technicians. They need doctors. Look at the demographics just in healthcare alone. But not just at the top, it's at the bottom. Let's talk about the CHIPS Act, competition with AI. You can't build a fab to produce chips if you don't have people digging the ditches. It's the bottom and the top, and everything in between. To the extent illegal aliens become more and more targets in our political culture of growing suspicion, that doesn't just affect the working class. I assure you, for a whole lot of white people walking into a grocery store, they don't know the difference between an undocumented Mexican and a PhD from India.
Right.
I'm writing in my little activities, trying to make that point to the high techs who are cozy with the Trumpistas now, right? Excuse me. You guys are so smart. Look around the corner. Do you think your PhDs are going to feel good when their kids are being harassed in school? I don't think so. You've got an economic, straight up money interest in the poison that's happening in our political culture. Connect the dots. So let me stop. To me, so I could go on by construction, food production, you name it.
I'm Wendy from Ithaca, New York. Can I make a comment?
Yes, Wendy, and then we'll hear from Laurel, and then we'll go to our second half.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in New York State, fully half of our agricultural workers are immigrants, and a great number of those are undocumented. And I saw a farmer interviewed recently on television who said that, you know, if all the immigrants who were involved in agriculture in New York State were picked up, there simply wouldn't be any food on the shelves in the stores anymore. And that's a reality that I don't think that. Well, I can't say Trump doesn't understand it. He can play both sides. I also have seen a very interesting recent program on television that interviewed 19 undocumented workers who worked for Trump, both in New York City and on his estate in New Jersey. So that's something for the other side. I mean, I think, you know, deporting most of our undocumented workers is simply economically untenable for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, real brief. You know, I'm an activist, was a civil rights litigator, you know, built this big nonprofit network in the 80s, et cetera, et cetera. And I was hired, and then I set up a public interest consulting business, which is what I've been doing for 30 years plus. No longer for pay. But I was hired by the agricultural industry in 99 to broker a deal between the unions and the industry, between the churches and the activists, and elements around the country, California, Florida, of labor-intensive agriculture. And we pulled it off. We came within 3 hours of enacting it in 2000. It's called Ag Jobs. The Farm Bureau resisted it because it was a power play dynamic within the industry between labor-intensive ag and the Farm Bureau, which is commodities, power base. That was 25 years ago. It's been on the brink of being enacted for 25 years. So without going into the details of that war story, it's a snapshot. Same thing with the Dreamers. First Dreamer bill, I was in the room, was introduced in 2001. So you're right, but the powers that be, the bankers, the investors, are not part of this game. And so because they don't connect the dots quite, and my side, our side, we've lost politically to the bad guys.
Mhm.
Thanks,
The bankers,
Rick.
the bankers don't get it.
Laura, let's hear from you, and then
Sure.
we'll
Really
shift
quickly,
to the 2nd half.
I'm Laurel, and I live in Mexico, former Californian colleague of Jack's. I concretely have 4 top priorities, and I don't expect you to address them all. I just love to mention them really quickly to get them off my chest because I'm worried. I'm worried about Guantanamo. I am very worried about the human rights abuses that we can anticipate there. I'm worried about the prospect for another round of traumatic child separations at the border. I am worried because my friends here in Mexico tell me that their undocumented children are planning, if they get picked up and deported, to leave their American grandchildren in the United States with friends and family because they think that's what's best for the children. And I'm really worried about what's going to happen to them. And finally, I have a client in New York who has been serving those authorized refugees that you mentioned, and the funding literally has gone away overnight. They have all these people they're responsible for. They are fundraising. They are private fundraising, trying to backfill that program. So I'm trying to figure out, is that one of the many illegal things Trump has done, or is that within his purview? And what are the prospects for those people and the nonprofits who serve them? I'm sorry, that's a big agenda again. I don't expect you to address them all. I just wanted to.
Well, let me ask. I could do 15 seconds on each.
Great.
Yeah.
I'll try. Okay, let's start at the end. There have been 4 or 5 lawsuits filed in the last 15 days by the resettlement agencies having to do with the formal refugee admissions that not just the admissions stopped dead. People approved they're not coming in, including Afghans, but they cut off the money. And the Catholic bishops filed a lawsuit 48 hours ago. The retired Bishop of Brooklyn is a very close friend of mine, et cetera, et cetera. World Relief, which is the evangelical refugee migration service arm, is involved in litigation. So they're trying. Okay. We'll see what happens. I don't know. But the point politically is the Trump folks knew exactly what they were doing. They went right for the jugular. They hit the jugular. You can win a lawsuit, but you may not get your money until 2 years from now, even if you win. Got it? So it cripples the systems nationally. That also then makes it cripples the political advocacy. It's another form of fear. You're getting government money, we can cut it off in a moment. And that's not just in the immigration context. That's across the board. Guantanamo. Guantanamo was used when I was involved with Haitian refugees, and Reagan and then Clinton were interdicting boats on the high seas. It's a disaster. Yes, it's part of the propaganda dynamic. Anybody anywhere can go to Guantanamo, and not just criminals, as was pointed out earlier. There are innocent Venezuelans, like teenagers, who are in Guantanamo today. Let me stop there because otherwise we'll keep going. But if that gives you a flavor with regard to your particulars, there are scores and scores and scores of these kinds of dynamics and issues in the immigration world. They've just stopped public funding for lawyers representing undocumented kids. All over the country, that said, there are Know Your Rights campaigns, and social services lawyers and otherwise, who are helping people create custody arrangements just in case. Again, the more we help people know their rights and anticipate the worst case scenario in a certain way, the more we're also, the good guys, are contributing to fear. So you see how insidious this can be. Fear from the Trump folks, we do our best, but it underscores your fears are real. Social psychology is a challenge.
So on that note, thank you, Rick, for this. How quickly a half hour can go when we're engaged. We'll move on to the more general issues of what can we do, not just in immigration, but in some of these other values and moral assaults that we're under. And again, Rick, maybe a minute or two of overview remarks, and then we'll throw open the discussion.
Let me ask, just before I go, is the rhythm of what we're doing so far about right? Everybody good? By and large? Okay.
Yeah, you're getting
You
lots
never
of
know,
lots
right?
of hands.
It's kind of like second city in Chicago. It's improv, sort of. Prepared improv. Well, I think immigration is at the heart of the belly of the beast. The beast being the beast of authoritarian control by virtue of the power of the government. It's the issue upon which Trump came down the golden elevator out of the gate. It's the issue that is was the subject of $1 billion in campaign and related advertising last year alone. $1 billion. Create this culture of suspicion. And if you can round up immigrants, you can round up anybody. Think about it that way. I mean, go back to that old, first they came for the communists. Well, first they came for the illegals. But who's illegal? Well, 1 million people who are legal just got declared illegal last week. Venezuelans and Haitians and others. Not permanently legal, but with this. So, in my mind, immigration is not just about immigration. It's the poisonous tip of the sword. Big picture. It's not just here, it's in Europe. It's not just in Europe, it's in Russia. Not just in Russia, it's in Myanmar, the Rohingya. Okay, this fear of the other. This is ancient stuff. So let me kind of build a little bit of a bridge accordingly from the immigration to the bigger picture. Now, think, and along these lines, and let's go back to Guantanamo. That's a camp for 30,000 people. Is a pledge. Is a game plan. They're looking at building a camp for 30,000 people in Texas for illegals getting ready for deportation. The governor of Texas is all over it. Look at if I may, excuse me, I don't want to be pedantic, but I do want to be direct. Look at Europe over the last 3 years, 4 years. Far right parties ascending. Great Britain being an exception with Labour. What's the biggest issue? Well, I don't know exactly, but immigration is one of them. Look at how migration has been used as a weapon by the totalitarians, and particularly driving people out of Syria. And then look at the consequences over the last decade of Syrians and others from the Middle East and from Africa coming up into Europe, and the organizing, whether it's the National Front in France or it's other far right parties, or now what's about to happen in Germany. So, big picture, this dynamic historically, these rivers of history around and about, those of us who deserve power are losing it to these sort of subhuman types, is a really big deal. Now, what to do about it writ large? I mean, I don't know, but I'll throw out something that's Musk specific. So just using Musk by way of illustration. And when I think Musk, I'm thinking, I don't know, 250 men primarily, and who are worth, whatever, pick a number, 50 billion and more, who are in cahoots. So I made a note to myself the other day, jam Musk, colon. So what, how do you jam Musk? Well, there's lawsuits. So here's the first one. Sue Musk and his minions in their personal capacities. All these 20-somethings. Hit him with 15 lawsuits personally. I used to be a lawyer. I put that on Substack. And I've talked to some civil rights lawyers. I don't know, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. But here's the point. Okay, so you just fired 10,000 USAID workers. And they made on average 100 grand. You did it without legal authority. You violated their rights. You did it with reckless, negligent disregard for the consequences. So we're looking for punitive damages. So sue Musk for $50 billion. I don't know. Every kid who dies because USAID funding's been cut off. What's a baby's life worth in Africa? Is it $1 million at birth or whatever? Times what the number is going to be. But the point is, sue them personally as a way of thinking about how power works and how no legitimate lawyer is going to do that unless there's something to it. But there are a lot of cases where even legitimate federal officials have been sued personally for violating constitutional rights. And Supreme Court cases. A global boycott of Tesla. It's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's already happening. Build on it. Whatever your reason is to go after Musk, sales of Tesla in Europe are down something like 40% in the last 6 months. You've seen news reports already of pickets and our generation type folks at Tesla dealers. Boycott, sell, young people, jack it up. Picket Musk's website. You're a nun, you're a retired person, you're a teenager, you're in college. Make it hard for people to go to work. Where Musk and Tesla, SpaceX, whatever. Go back to the labor organizing days. Go back to the boycotts of the civil rights movement. Think about it. Boycotts are hard to do. But boycotts have an extraordinary rich history. And so whether it's Musk or it's Bezos and Amazon or it's Zuck and Facebook, and again, all this stuff is easy to imagine and hard to do, but it's already happening. So back to the boomers. Boomers grew up in the civil rights era. Boomers protested the Vietnam War. Get engaged. I'll leave you with two other thoughts and I'll stop. Big picture, big picture. All this, Musk and the tech bros are running the world now with Trump. There was a big New York Times story 4 or 5 days ago I sent around to my listserv of several hundred people about how now there's kumbaya Christian gurus in Silicon Valley. And Peter Thiel is a celebrity because at some dinner he promoted his Christian faith. Well, two thoughts. I've already talked to a couple of senior Catholic leaders in the country. Do a pilgrimage to Silicon Valley and talk to these people about Christianity and what's involved, and do it publicly. Ask to meet with Peter Thiel. Go at it. I gave advice to a senior advisor the other day to the Cardinal of New York.
Dolan.
Go on Fox News. In other words, go into the belly of the beast and ridicule these people for who they claim to be and who they really are. So let me stop. Those are kind of stream of consciousness thoughts, but stuff like this is stirring out there.
Thank you, Rick. So comments and observations from any of you about, particularly about something maybe you've been involved in that you feel like worked, provided some resistance, and tell a story or two, as well as asking any further follow-up questions. Go ahead, Karen. Jump in. Just jump in. You unmuted.
I'm just thinking, I'm never going to be on Fox News, thank goodness. But I think the way we can help most is by talking to people we know, anybody we run into who is a MAGA, and just asking them, what in the world is he doing for you? Quite frankly, the whole thing is racist. I mean, from the time Trump did the Central Park 5 and everything way back in the 80s. But this whole immigration thing is racist. But I think the way to maybe help is to talk to people one-on-one, because, I don't have a platform.
Thanks, Karen. Other Karen had a point?
I have a mother who's going to be 99 in April. And she's a rabble-rouser still.
Good.
In her community at the Pines in Davidson, North Carolina. So exactly right. Wherever, however.
I was going to make a comment that I just learned yesterday, that Univision is MAGA in many ways. And that's something that, I don't speak Spanish. I don't go to Univision, but that's all. There's all kinds of pockets where this, this MAGA hate is going on that we're not even realizing, that maybe we need to learn about and try to interfere. I have my windows in my house plastered with signs, and I don't know if it's helping conversation or not, but I figure I own my house, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments? Just jump in. Yes, Alexander.
I keep waiting for the moment when someone like Joseph Welch showed up in 1954 and said, "Until this moment, Senator, I think I never gauged your cruelty or your recklessness. Have you no sense of decency?" And that's one instance. When you think of Tammany Hall, Boss Tweed, what brought that down was the New York Times, historically. Could that happen today? I don't know. You think of the end of the Nixon era. There were principals. There were people who had something to say. So So I'd like to get Rick's take on whether there's anybody left that could do something like that.
There's a lot of fear of retribution and retaliation in the highest circles you could imagine, whether that's corporate or religious or Republican senators of good faith who are fearful of being primaried by Musk, who just spent $250 million to back Trump in the election.
I think they're fearful of the actual physical violence to their families.
And there's some of that, exactly. So back to the vigilantes targeting illegals. I just saw a story yesterday about members of Congress who are fearful of physical risk, indeed. So how do people like us combat that?
Mm-hmm.
One, by pointing it out and being part of saying it's absolutely unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Second, thinking about, again, back to red state governors as a political arena. I'd pick three of them. Pick Florida, Texas, Tennessee, whatever, where really nasty stuff is going on. And well, boycott the states. Don't vacation in Florida anymore. You were thinking about having your convention in Nashville? No, not anymore. You can't do that. We can't go down there and legitimate. I mean, again, all easier said than done. But the NAACP just came out with a boycott list yesterday of companies that have backed off of DEI. It wasn't about immigration, it was about DEI. Target, Amazon, 2 or 3 others. It's a boycott list. Remember how boycotts worked back in the Jim Crow era. And when we were alive, the ending of Jim Crow and the 50s and 60s and went on in the 70s. I was involved in a lawsuit when I was 26 years old in the NAACP and a secondary boycott, et cetera. So there are different ways to deal with that kind of stuff. But again, easier said than done. Think about powerful people you know or people you know bank shots. 2 or 3 steps removed. Who knows somebody who was chairman of the board of a bank and has maybe retired or maybe is still working or was an industry leader or some heavy hitting religious leader, right, et cetera, who people like us could maybe help them connect the dots and say, you know what, if this gets out of hand, it could be disastrous. And then they start going to people with money and try to, again, you never know until you have a conversation what you might trigger.
Can I jump in again? This is Wendy from New York State.
Please.
There's something else very specific, and some of you probably know this already, but Trump, in appointing his administrators, Trump left 3 empty seats in the House of Representatives, and there are going to be special elections coming up for those seats, and there are Democrats that are running for the seats. And if all 3 of them, there are 3 empty seats, if all 3 of them win, the Democrats would regain the majority in the House of Representatives. So to me, that's one immediate way to basically, I've been, even though none of them, well, one of them is in my state, I've been sending what little money I have to support their campaigns. 2 of them are in Florida. One is Josh Weil in Florida. The other is, I don't know her first name. Her last name is Valmont in Florida. And the other is a fellow, I think it's Gail Benden here in New York State. He's in upstate New York. But the first 2 elections are coming up April 1st. The election for the representative in New York State has not been set. The date hasn't been set yet, but I think contributing to their elections and supporting them would be great. There's another fellow whose name is Ossoff, who's a senator from Georgia, won a very slim election. He's a Democrat, won a very slim election in Georgia, which supported Trump. And he's going to be running for re-election. And, you know, he's not going to have an easy time, but supporting him is another, I think, constructive possibility.
Thank you.
Can you give those names again? Those three?
Yeah, the two in Florida, one is Josh Weil, I think it's Weil, or Josh Weil.
Okay.
The second is a woman whose last name is Valmont, Valmont.
Oh, okay.
And the third one, I honestly don't know how to spell his name, but I think it's Gelben.
Oh, okay. I've gotten emails from him.
Yeah,
I know who you mean. I just you never know when you get all those emails, you know, what kind of a chance or whether they're the right person.
His
You know?
first name is Blake. It's Blake Gelbenden. And, you know, again, well, you've got the spelling probably. They're all on Facebook as well.
Okay.
For those of you on Facebook.
Yes, we're going to organize to smash the state using Facebook. Comments, questions, observations?
I don't know if anybody can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't see myself on the screen. This is Barb Meek from Phoenix. And I just think we ought to support whoever is running against Glenn Youngkin, who is running for governor this November. He can't quite get his arms around why he should not support Trump. So that's one thing. The other thing I'm doing is I'm doing some little stuff. I mean, I have a project that I'm helping immigrants learn English, and refugees, and that's kind of a good thing. So that's just a one-on-one thing. But anyway, I would say find somebody you want to support and support them.
Thank you. And did you say you're in Phoenix, right, Barbara?
Yeah. You know me by a different name.
Yes, I was just letting people know you're.
Can you see me?
No,
because I can't see me either. But that's okay. I'm having a bad hair day. So
you're a ghost. Yes, Karen and Barbara and I went to high school together.
Hello too.
Or one of the Karens, not both Karens. Other comments from people, or questions, or ideas?
Jack, I'm just really overwhelmed by the speed and organization of the other side, so to speak. And so we can suggest a lot of things that might have some payoff in a few months, but I find it really hard to get a good sense of the legal issues, how long they'll take, if the Supreme Court ever does rule in a meaningful way, as far as I'm concerned, how long would that take? Because it seems like once all this is blown apart, it's going to be pretty impossible to put back together. And does anyone have a good, quick, I don't mean quick as in done, but where we're doing something that affects the immediate situation?
Did you all know that there's an economic boycott coming up on the 28th of February?
Yeah.
It's a nationwide boycott. You're not supposed to spend any money from midnight of the 28th until midnight, at the end of the day. And I hope there will be a lot of people doing that, and it will make our presence felt.
Yeah, that's a good example. I think it's been pretty well advertised, and I suspect it will grow as the days go on.
I would suggest to that also, and thank you, Judith, to sort of add sort of Lenten approach of Catholics to this, or the Sabbath approach of Jews and others, and not just put off purchase till the next day, but just don't drive anywhere if you can help it. Don't eat out. Fast a little bit. eat lightly, and so don't just go buy the car the next day.
I'm confused because some people are saying not the big box and not, but go ahead and support the family businesses.
What I read is only do that if you have to. You desperately need medication or something, get it from a family business. Otherwise, don't get any medication or whatever.
Yeah. So in other words, the message is a little unclear, but yeah.
Well, there can be the concept of a quote general strike.
Mm-hmm.
We're all staying home
on
day one, and the challenge becomes: does it become massive? Okay, or you do it, try it 3 times, and the fourth time it's massive. That's not my game, right? I mean, but I get it, and no one's going to buy a Tesla again. No one's going to. You never don't use Amazon again unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
That's for as long as it takes. So you can have these distinctions between a 1 day or 1 week. That kind of stuff's going to come from the bottom up. That's going to come, if it's going to get legs. That's going to come from younger people. That's going to come from unions. That's going to come probably down the road if the shit really hits the fan badly in a lot of places. It's going to be hard for it to generalize until some of the things that's happening right now, national parks, VA hospitals, all these people being laid off. What's it going to look like in 3 or 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Just from what they've already done.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage people to think about go into the belly of the beast. Try to work right-wing media. Go to conservative preachers. Look at business leaders who are more smart than not, but maybe Trumpers, and say, have you thought this through? Like, just economically? They may own a construction company. They may be a developer with own buildings. What happens if the janitorial staff gets freaked out? Just help them kind of get it. History's happening every day. So
Rick,
do your best.
We live on, yeah, I am. Changed my name. We live on Cape Cod, and the National Seashore just announced they are not going to be able to start recruiting people for the summer. So that's going to have an impact when people come up here to go on vacation and find that either beaches are closed or that there isn't the kind of attention to keeping the beaches up. I assume they'll have to get lifeguards, but those sorts of things, and I guess it's other national parks, that's going to have an impact on people. And so letting people know why that's the case would be important.
Well, to say nothing about tied back to the immigration issue. Seasonal workers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There may be students from wherever coming in, they're in college and, they're doing a gig in Cape Cod or Sun Valley or, North Carolina beaches, times tens of thousands. That's not going to happen. Just the whole bureaucracy, forget everything else we've been talking about. The bureaucracy for things like tourist visas.
Yeah.
Business visas, it's going to become ice cold overnight. And a lot of industry may not feel that in the next 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 weeks, but they're going to feel it in the next 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 months. And so back to immigration, but it's not just about immigration. So again, immigration is like the poisonous tip of the sword. But when you think more broadly, veterans. Grandma's coming home because the nursing home can't find a janitor.
Mm.
Make it real as best you can. And trust me, power comes in many forms, and it can be created out of nothing. And you never know when you're going to get lucky. I would bet you that 2 or 3 of you on this call tonight are within 1 or 2 phone calls removed from somebody with real power who can actually begin to, kind of start pounding on some tables in some places like a red state governor or the Republican committee in the state of Georgia or whatever it is. So just think like that, and back with supporting candidates. Yes, I mean Ossoff in Georgia is extremely important. Of the four races you mentioned, that is a big one. So lots of different ways people can be powerful, and little things add up. So if I leave you with nothing else, I started my career in immigration as a lawyer for refugees from Haiti, Black boat people. And Jimmy Carter denied every single one of 4,000 political asylum applications. Jimmy Carter. We sued him. Haitian Refugee Center versus Civiletti. The leader was Father Gerard Jean Just from Miami, a Haitian priest. And out of nothing, they won. And 40,000 Haitians got green cards, and 6 years later under Ronald Reagan. So you never know. Power comes in many forms. Take a run at it. Keep talking. Thank you for inviting me to join you. This was fun.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Rick, very much. And we'll send out some notes. And among the things I'll have in there is my own or Alexander's email addresses. And if you want to be on Rick's listserv, we can pass your name on to him. I get 3 or 4 things a day that he's clipped, and we can broaden that group as well. But
it's a lot. The listserv is a lot, but it's for folks who are players in this game of immigration. So I'm happy to add you, but it is a lot.
Well, you can look at the headline and delete or read the whole thing.
Exactly. Right.
So any last words from anyone else who'd like to say something? Yes, Karen, jump in.
Well, in my Christmas card, I sent a last of fascist warnings, behaviors that were precursors to fascism. And I was thinking about printing it out and putting in neighbors' mailboxes, standing on the street corners and passing it out. But I've since thought that maybe I need to make a list of consequences of deporting immigrants list, and that we need to stand on the street corners and use it as a tool for conversation. Anybody else want to do that with me?
All you Long Beach folks.
Okay, Karen.
Like the energy. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Boomers of the world, unite.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rick. It's been great.
Thanks,
All right.
Rick.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Recording off.